Hey guys, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a ChatGPT clone. So what we're going to be building is what you can see right here on my screen. It's going to be a very simple chatbot where a user can come in and ask a couple of questions. So if I come in here and say and I just hit enter, you can see that it gives me a response, right? I could ask anything and I could be like, who is the founder of Apple? And it's going to give me the answer to the founder of Apple. As you can see, it gives me all the founders. So this is what we're going to be building. It's going to be a chatbot. A user can ask whatever they want to ask and they'll get a response in real time. Now we are going to be using a platform called Circumeo to deploy the Django application at the end of this video. This platform makes it very easy for us to deploy a Django project. It allows us to deploy a Django project with just 2 clicks. You're going to see this in action later in this video. So there'll be a link in the description below. Click on it and sign up to Circumeo so you can follow along with this tutorial and also deploy your own Django projects. Now, having this said, let's get straight into this video. The first thing we want to do is to create a new Django project. First, I'm going to open up my terminal right here. So I'm on a Mac, I can use the terminal. If you're on a Windows, open up your command prompt. Now I'm going to navigate into the folder where I want to create this project. I'm going to go into Documents. Then in there, I'm going to go into Projects folder. This could be any folder on your computer. This is just where I want to create my project. So I created a folder called YT ChatGPT _ clone. And in here, I'm just going to say make directory ChatGPT, something like this. And I'm going to cd into that. Okay, so there was a grammatical error. I'm just going to cd into that. It doesn't really matter. So cd into this. Now if I say ls, it's going to be blank. I'm just going to clear this. And the first thing I want to do is to create a virtual environment. So I'm going to say Python 3 -m. We're going to say venv, then just like this. And this is going to create a new virtual environment for us in this particular folder. I'm going to say ls. Now we have a virtual environment and I'm going to activate that virtual environment. Before I move on, let me tell you why I'm creating a virtual environment. Now, this is very good because it basically allows us to create an environment for every project that we're working on. So for this project, I'm creating this virtual environment. This means everything I'm doing when I install new packages or libraries, they're going to be installed under this environment. It's very easy and very good to work with virtual environment. It's just because it makes everything looks more organized or seem more organized. So the next thing I'm going to do is to activate this virtual environment. I'm going to say source. I'm going to go into vim /bin/activate. It's like this. And when you see this bracket right here with virtual env in it, that means the environment has been activated. Now I can install Django in here. So I'm going to say pip3 install Django. And this is going to install Django for me into this virtual environment. Now I can use Django in this particular environment. So now I can say Django admin. I'm going to create a new Django project right now. So I'll say Django admin, start project. And I'm going to name the project ChatGPT. Just like this. If I say ls, you can see that we have a new project called ChatGPT. I'm going to cd into ChatGPT. If I do ls, you can see we are in this folder. And the next thing I'm going to do is to create a Django app. So whenever we are working with Django, we have to create a project, which is what we just created. And we have to create an app. So an app goes along with the project, and you're going to see why later in this video. So to do this, we're going to say Python 3 manage.py. We need to make sure that is py start app, and we're going to give it the name of the app. I'm just going to say chat. So name this whatever you want. Now if I type ls again, you can now see that we have a new folder called chat. So this works, everything is good. The next thing we want to do now is to open this up in VS Code. So what I'm just going to do now is to swipe to VS Code, and I'm gonna come here. So I have VS Code opened up, and you can do the same and just come to the top, click on File, and click on Open Folder. Navigate to that folder. I'm just gonna open this. Good. Right here. Okay, good. So right here we have this project opened. This is the Django project, and this is the virtual environment. So in the Django project, we also have the Django app. So everything is done here, which is nice, and this is what we want. The next thing I'm going to do is to make sure that this project is actually up and running and everything is good. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say ls. Before I do anything, I'm going to activate the virtual environment right here in this terminal. So I don't need to use the other terminal. So I don't need to keep swiping. And what I'm just going to do is to say source, just like we did before, virtual env /bin/activate. Just like this, that is activated. Now if I do python 3 manage.py run server, so it says no file with this directory. This is because I'm doing it in this folder, but I need to go into the folder of the Django project. So I'm going to do that, cd ChatGPT, and now I can run that again. And let me tell you why before I run it. If I run ls, you can now see that the folder that we are in contains the manage.py file. So now we can run that manage.py file by saying python 3 manage.py run server. Just like this. And now I'm just going to copy this. It says the server has started on this particular host. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to go into my browser and run it. So right here, as you can see, the Django project is running successfully. Now we can move on with the development of this project. So now that we have our project running, the next thing we want to do is to add our front-end template. So we don't want this to be showing, we want the template that we created to show. So what I'm going to do is to come in here, and in this folder, I'm going to create a new folder called templates. I'm going to say templates. And this folder is where the HTML files is going to be located. Now what I'm going to do quickly is to just drag the template that I created for this in here. I'm just going to drag that into this templates folder. So I'm going to close this. So this is the template folder right here. Very basic, just a normal chat system. And I'm going to quit this. Once again, this and everything we're using in this video is available on GitHub, so I'll link it in the description below so you can easily access that. But now, because we brought this in here, that doesn't mean if we come in here and hit refresh, it automatically uses that particular HTML file. We need to configure that. I'm going to come in here and go into ChatGPT, then go into settings.py, and I'm going to come down. I'm going to close this. First thing we need to do is under installed apps, we need to add the app that we created, which is Chat. Then when we scroll down here, we look for where we see templates and go into theirs. Then what we're going to do is to say base there, comma, templates. Just like this. Now what this does is that it basically says whenever a user is trying to request for a template file, such as an HTML file, go into the base directory and in there go into the templates folder and look for that file. So if I say I want to request for index.html file, what it's going to do is to come into the base directory of this project. Now know that the base directory of a project is the directory that has this manage.py file. If I come here, this is the base directory. And then it's going to go into the templates folder right here, and it's going to look for index.html, which is right here. I can save this, and now I could come down. For now, I don't really need to do anything, and I'm just going to close settings.py. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to set up the URLs. So because I've done this, if I come here, that also doesn't mean it automatically uses that HTML page. What we need to do is to come in here, and inside the chat application, I'm going to go into views. Right now, But before we do this, so there are two things we can do. We can do it anyhow we want. What I'm going to do first is to create a new file called urls.py. So right here, just say new urls.py. I'm going to hit enter. And this is basically the file that contains all of the URLs on our website. So I'm going to say from Django.urls import path. Now this is what we use to specify a new URL. And now we're going to create a new list called URL patterns. And this is basically going to take in all the URLs on our website. So now we're going to say path, just like this. And if this is blank, this means this path that we're specifying is the home URL. Now I'm going to say comma, and I'm going to leave this blank for now. Before I do this, I'm going to come into views.py. Now views.py is basically saying this is where we create views. Now a view is what happens when a URL is called. So for example, we're trying to configure this URL. If a user goes into this particular home page, what do we want to happen? We need to create a view for that. So to do this is just a normal Python function. We'll say dev, and we could say index. It's going to take a request. For now, we're just going to say pass. Now if I come in here, now that we have this view right here, we can import this index view in here. So I'm going to say from .views import index, just like this. And now when a user go into the home page, we want to serve the index view. Whatever is being done here in this view right here is what is going to be done when a user tries to go into the home page. And we can give this URL a name. Name equals, we can say index, we can call it home, whatever we want to call it. Now we're just going to add a comma at the end because this is a list. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to come back in here. Now instead of just having this, I want to show this index.html page. So when a user tries to come into the home page, I want to show this index.html page. To do this, we'll say return render request index.html, just like this. Now once again, because I've done this, doesn't mean if I come in here and hit refresh, is automatically going to use it. There's just one last thing, and the reason being is because everything we've been configuring is inside this chat folder, or this application. But remember I said earlier, a Django application is a subset of a Django project. It's not the main project. So what we need to do is everything we're configuring here, we basically have to update the project and say, yo, this is what we've done, right? Now we need to do the same for the URLs. We need to come into the project folder right here. Automatically there is a urls.py file. And what we need to do is to say, when a user tries to go to the home page, go into this app URLs, and whatever is being done there is what should be done. I'm going to come here. I'm going to import something called include. And right here, we're just going to say path. We're going to leave it blank, so that specifies for the home page. We're going to use include, and we're just going to say chat, which is the Django app.urls. Now this is going to work, and before I show you that it's going to work, let me explain why. Now this is because what we are saying is we are configuring for the whole project now, and we are saying when a user tries to come to the home page, include chat.urls. That means go into the chat application, which is this particular application right here. Go into the urls.py file, which is this file right here. Then look for this exact URL. If we come in here, this is the exact URL. Then whatever is being done here is what we want to happen. So in here, we are using the index view from views.py. And if we come into views.py, in this index view, we are rendering index.html, which is this index.html template file. Now, I hope that makes sense. I hope you understand the flow. And now I'm going to come back in here. Now, when I hit refresh, we're going to see that we have this basic and nice looking chat. So I just named it Chat AI right here. You can change that to wherever you want. But what we want to do mainly is that whenever a user tries to, let's say, send a message or ask a question like, who is the richest man in the world, or who invented the MacBook, something like this, we want the user to have a response for everything, right? And that's what we're going to do next. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is to get our OpenAI API key. So OpenAI API is what is going to be powering this chatbot that we are building. So for example, when a user asks a question like, what continent is Canada located in? That particular query is going to be submitted to the OpenAI API. And this API has multiple models. So it has multiple AI models. And we're going to choose the one we want to use. And it's basically going to ask that model the question, and we're going to get a response and then show that response to the user. So in a summary, OpenAI is what is going to be powering this chatbot. Now let's do that. What you need to do is to go to openai.com, and you need to come here under products. Under products, you're going to see where we have API login. So click on API login. It should take you through the system of logging in. If you don't have an account, just create an account. And once you've been signed in, you should come here. So you have two options to go to, either ChatGPT or API. So ChatGPT is their interface where you can interact with their AI model without having to go through their API process and all of that. But that's not what we want to do. We want to build our own interface, right? We're building this out, but we need something to process the backend, right? Where all the information is actually coming from, which is the API that we're going to use. I'm going to click on API, and this should log me in. So I'm just going to say get started. I'm going to leave it like this. So this should log me in right here. So right here, we can just play around with their APIs and different type of models that they have. So if you come here, you're going to see all of the models they have, right? And you're going to see the difference in the models, which one is better for what you want to use, and all of that. So we're not going to go into too much details about what model we're going to use now. But what we need to do is to actually get the API key. So I'm going to come right here where we have API keys on this tab. And I'm going to click on create a new secret key like this. And what I'm going to do is to just leave it as default. I'm also going to leave this default, leave this as default project. Permissions, let's just say all, and click on create secret key. Now we want to copy this key. You want to make sure you have this key copied, because if you don't, immediately you click on done, you won't be able to copy this key again. So you want to make sure you have this key copied and saved somewhere. So for now, I'm just going to copy it, come back into our code, and right at the top, I'm just going to comment and paste that key, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is to configure OpenAI. As I said, we're going to be using OpenAI in this. And for us to use OpenAI API, we have to download their Python library. If I come in here, I could click on done now because I've copied that API key. And what we can just do is to come here. So if I just search OpenAI API documentation Python. So if you search that, come into API reference, you're going to see how to use Python to basically access OpenAI models. So the first thing, it says install OpenAI. We're going to do that right now. So it says run pip3 install OpenAI. I'm going to bring up my terminal. Just going to open up a new terminal right here, and automatically it recognizes this virtual environment. And what I'm going to do is to just say pip3 install OpenAI. Now this is going to download everything we need, and it's going to install OpenAI. Let me just close this tab so you can see this properly. Good. Now we have OpenAI installed. Now we can use OpenAI in this project, right? Now we can come back and just switch here and then close the tab. Now that we have OpenAI installed, if you come down, you can see what it says. It says we need all of this, right? But we're not using core, so we don't need to use this particular format. We need to use something similar to this, right? So client equals OpenAI, and just specify the API key. So you can do it however you want, but I'm going to show you how the most direct way. As you can see, it's giving you various ways you can use it depending on what you're using. But don't worry about all of this. Don't worry too much about it. Just follow what I'm going to explain. I'm going to come back in here. And right here, what I'm just going to do is to, first of all, import OpenAI. So I'm going to say from OpenAI, import OpenAI, just like this. And now the next thing I can do is to say client equals OpenAI. Now we're going to use this OpenAI module that we installed, and we're going to have to specify the API key. So we're going to say API key equals, and now we're going to paste in this particular API key that we copied. We're going to paste that in, and that should do the work, right? So now we have OpenAI configured. We've connected it to our project. I just removed the API key that I commented earlier. Now that we have this configured in our project, we can now use this OpenAI to, we can now use the API to basically power our chatbot, right? And that is the next thing that we're going to do. So once again, make sure that whenever you're generating the API key from here, you copy it first before closing that, because you can't access it. And once that is done, we can move on to the next thing. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is to actually get this working. Just swiping back here into this chatbot. I can refresh this, everything is still fine. But if I type anything and hit enter, nothing really happens. As you can see, it just gives us this error. Just going to go back and hit refresh. Now, what we want to do is we want a user to be able to ask a question and actually get a response. So there are various things we need to take into account. This is a chat system, and because it's a chat system, when a user types something like I and clicks on send, because this is a normal HTML form, as default, it's gonna refresh the page or take us to the page where this form is being submitted. We don't want to do that here, because as I said, this is a chat system. So when a user types in a message and hits send, we don't want the page to be reloaded every time. We just want it to be the user experience to be nice. Once the user hits send, we want this page to remain and the user still gets their response, right? Just like any chat system you use on any platform like Facebook or whatever. So that's what we're going to do. But to do this, we're going to use JavaScript, right? We're not just going to use a normal HTML form submission and Django form processing. So we're going to use JavaScript to basically make sure that this page is not reloaded, but we're still getting the response that we need. Now let's swipe up to our code, swipe right to our code and do this. What I'm going to do is, first of all, let me close this particular URLs. We don't need it again. And now I'm going to come into templates and I'm going to go into index.html. So for now, I'm going to close up this style and I'm going to come down right here to where we have this form. So right here, this is the form for this particular input bar, right? Where a user can type a message to send. As you can see, we are using a post method. One thing you need to know whenever you're using a post method in Django, you must have CSRF token. CSRF underscore token. So just to make sure we don't get no errors, you must put that. So this is the input bar and this is the send button right here, right? But now, as I said, we're going to use JavaScript to actually send this. So right before the end of the body, I'm just going to say script, open and close. And in here, we're going to do quite a few things, right? The first thing we want to do is we want to get this chat form element. So if I come here, this form, we want to get this form and store it as like a variable in JavaScript. And the next thing we want to do is to get this input specifically, right? And after that, we want to get this old chat history. So this chat history, I put a comment here that says chat history will be inserted here dynamically, right? And what I mean by this is, right now in this chat history, we can see that this is blank. But whenever a user sends a message, and also whenever a message is being, or a response is being gotten back, we then want to create that div tag or that HTML element to show it. Right now, there's nothing there, right? This is because there's no message. But we're going to use JavaScript later to dynamically add new elements to show all of the message history. So you're going to see how we're going to do that also. Now, what we're going to do right here is, as I said, we're going to get this particular form, store it in like a JavaScript variable. We're going to get the input, and then we're also going to get the whole history, right? Just so we can be able to access all of this in the script. Now to do this, I'm going to say constant chat form equals document dot get element by ID. So we are getting this chat form element by its ID. So I'm going to come here. This is the form and the ID is chat form. Just like this. Copy. Paste. As easy as that. We're going to do the same thing for the chat input. So this is the actual input that a user types, right? The actual message. We're going to say document dot get element by ID, and the ID for this input is chat input, just like this. The last thing is const chat history. We're going to use this also later down the line. Documents dot get elements by ID, and the ID for the chat history is just chat history. Copy that, paste it in. We're dealing with JavaScript, so always add your semicolon. Now the next thing we want to do is I'm gonna come here, and since I have access to this chat form, I'm gonna say chat form dot add event listener. So I'm going to add an event listener, and basically the way I like to understand event listeners is it's basically going to listen to an event, right? So it's going to listen for when an event occurs, and what we want to do is we want to listen and capture when this submit button is clicked. So when this submit button is clicked in this chat form right here, then we want to do something, right? So what I'm going to say is chat form dot add event listener submit. So it automatically sees that as submit. So once that is clicked, or there's basically something going on with that particular button, we're gonna create function event, and what the first thing we're gonna do is to prevent the page from reloading, because normally, you know, once we hit this submit button, which is a send button here, the page reloads or it goes to another page, right? So to prevent that, we're going to say event.prevent default, just like this. Now that's going to prevent the page from reloading. Now the next thing is we want to get the value of what the user inputs right here in this bar. So we're going to say constant. I'm going to name it message equals chat input, which is the actual input. We want to get the actual value, and let's trim it down to the necessary stuffs. And what we're now going to do is we're going to say if there is actually a message. So if message, right, this message is valid, what we want to do is to basically update this history with that message. So if this message is valid, right, what we want to do before we even process anything is to show that message on here, right, like this. And to do that, we're going to come into this chat history element, right, this div tag, or this div element, and in here we're going to append or chip in a new element to show that particular message, right? Now to do this, I'm going to come here and I'm going to say constant, let's say message wrapper equals document, and now we're going to create a new element. So right here, create element, and we want it to be a div element, right? And in it, we're going to add, let's say in this element, I'm going to give it some classes. So the reason why I'm giving it some classes is because if I come into style, I already styled what I need for that element. So this element specifically is going to be chat message, right? And also chat message user, right? So I've given it all the styling needed, right? And we're just going to make sure that the element that we are using has the necessary styling. That's why we're going to add the classes. I'm going to collapse this. I'm going to come back in here, and we're going to say message wrapper dot class list dot add, and we want to add chat hyphen message, and then we want to add the user class. Good. Now we've added these two, and we're going to do this again, right? And we're going to say constant message element. So this is the message wrapper, but then this is the actual element, equals to document. Similar, we're going to create a new, so we're going to say create element. So we're going to create a new div element, and we're going to give it its class list message element dot class list dot add. So this is the actual message. If we come into the styling, you're going to see that I add styling for message, right? And also for message.user. So let's come here and give it those particular classes. So message and user, just like this. Good. Now the next thing we're going to do is basically chipping this in there, right? But then the next thing we're going to do is we want to give this message element the value of whatever the user types in here. So if the user types in I, that element should be pre-populated with the value I. To do this, very easy, just say message element dot text content, just like this, should be equals to this message right here that we collected, right, from the chat input, equals message. Once again, we're dealing with JavaScript, give it a semicolon. We're going to save this, and the last thing we're going to do for this particular use case, which is basically adding the message to pop up here, is to then append this message wrapper into this. So we're going to append, first of all, we want this message element to be inside this message wrapper, and then this message wrapper, we want it to be inside this chat history. If you remember, chat history is this blank element right here, which is basically this old box. Now let's do that real quick. I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to say message wrapper dot append child message element, right? Give a semicolon. Now we're going to say chat history dot append child. Now we're going to give a message wrapper. Good. And then once everything has been done and appended, we want to clear this particular input bar. So if I type something and click enter, I don't want this to still be there after I click enter. I want it to be gone. So to do that, very easy, we're just going to say chat input dot value equals blank, just like this. Now we can save this. Now the next thing we're going to do before we continue with this script is to come into URLs and have a new URL where we can submit this particular call. So once a user clicks on send, we're going to come here and use fetch to basically submit that particular form to a specific URL, and we're going to send the information to that URL, and we're going to retrieve that information into this views.py file in a function right here, and then we're going to send that information to OpenAI. Then we're going to get the response and we're going to send it back to this script. Then we can show it in our HTML, which we then show here. I hope that flow makes sense. So now we're going to come into URLs and we're going to create a new URL. And to do this, we are just going to use path. And we're going to say response. We're going to call this response views.response. Just like this, but we don't need to use views dot just because we already have dot views imported. We're just going to say response. So for now, this is going to give us an error because right here we don't have any view called response. So we're going to create that response request, and for now we're just going to say pass, just like this. I'm going to come back in here. Now you can see that response is recognized, and we're going to say name equals response, just like this. Always make sure there's a comma here because this is a list. Now we're going to come into views, right? And what we're going to do is we're basically going to say, because in here we are using a post method to submit a form, right? So we want to get that information that is going to be submitted when we are ready. So we're going to say if request dot method is equals to post, then we want to get that particular message. So we're going to store it in a variable called message. We're going to say request dot post dot get, and we're going to be sending it in a variable called message also, right? When we're ready, as you can see, this if we come in here, this variable is called message. We're going to be sending that message variable later, and we want to get that. So we're going to say dot get message, and if we don't get anything, we're just going to leave it blank, just like this. Now we're going to use the OpenAI API to get a response or an answer to whatever is being asked in this message. Now we're just going to come here and say completion like this equals to client. If you remember, client was this OpenAI configuration dot chat dot completions dot create, and we're going to have to specify the model that we want to use, right? So remember when I said if we come here and if we come in here, just gonna go back a bit, go back, it's gonna load that up for us real quick. Go back. As you can see, this is the playground, and you can see the various models they have. GPT 4.0 is the latest one they just added, and it is the best out of all. You can choose any one you want. All of them has various pricing options, but for now we're just gonna go with GPT 4.0, right? This API is very cheap, fairly cheap for what it does, right? So I'm just gonna go with the latest one. So we're just gonna say GPT 4.0, right? And now we're gonna give it the message. Messages equals to, gonna be a list, this, and then we're gonna say row. We're gonna tell it what it should be doing. So row is system. So this is a system, which is basically the AI, and content. We're telling that you are a helpful assistant. So now it knows that it is here to assist whoever is sending any message. Now the next row, which is the user, which is whoever is sending the message, the content of the message should be this message variable that we got from the form, just like that. And right here, what we're then going to do is to say, I'm going to create a new variable called answer equals completion dot choices dot message dot content, just like this. What this is going to do is going to get the actual content, right? The actual response content. So this completion, once we run this, if we just print this particular completion variable, what is going to happen is that it's going to print a whole bunch of JSON response, right? A whole lot of response, right? So stuff like the ID, the timestamp, all of that. We don't really need any of that. What we need is just the response from the AI, which is this, right? This is the path to it, and then we're storing that particular response in the answer variable. Now what we're going to do is to say return. We want to return a JSON response, but before we can use JSON response, we need to come here and import it. We're going to say from Django.http import JSON response, just like this. JSON response, and I'm going to come down in here and I'm going to use that. I'm going to say return JSON response, and we want to return it in a variable called response, just like this. And the value of that variable is going to be answer. So whatever the actual answer is, we're going to return it, and the variable name is going to be called response. Good. But what if this request is not a post request and it's just some random request? Then we just want to return JSON response. But this time around, make sure you can see that this time around, I'm going to say response. I'm going to set it to invalid request, just like this. And we're going to give it a status. Make sure we spell that right. Equals 400, just like this. Now we've gotten this quite right. This is good. All this configuration is nice. Now the next thing that we need to do is right here in index.html, we need to then send this form or submit this form to this particular view through the URL from here, through this URL right here. And then it is going to send us a response, and we can show that response right here in our chat system. So to do this, I'm going to scroll down, and right after we have chat input.value, next thing that we're going to do is to use fetch. I'm going to come here and say fetch response like this. That's what we're submitting it to. And the method we are using is post. Headers. So the headers required for this, I'm going to give it content type. Like this. And the value is going to be application slash x www hyphen form hyphen URL encoded. And we're going to have a comma. I'm going to scroll down, and now we're going to have its body. Let's say new. We're going to use URL. Let's use search params. So we're using URL search parameters. This, and we need to give it a CSRF middleware token. Good. And the value for this is basically going to be the value of, if I scroll here, the value of this CSRF token. So to do that, we're going to say document.query selector square brackets name equals CSRF middleware token. Just like this. I want to get the value by saying the value, comma, and now the actual message, which is what we're going to be sending. I'm going to say message, and the value is message. Once again, message is this right here, which is the value of the chat input. Now all of this is closed, right? So this is closed for the body, and then this is closed for fetch. So right here, what we're gonna say is then response. Now we want to get that response. Response.json. So I want to get that in JSON format, right? Just like this. And then dot, then now I want to get the data from that response. Like this. Open and close curly braces and hit enter. Now in here, what we're just going to do is to say constant response should be equals to data.response. So we're basically saying we want to get the response variable from this particular data that was given, right? So this data, if you come in here, as you can see, this data is all of this JSON response. So let's just close that up. So this data is this JSON response. What we're saying is we want to get the value of this response key, right, from this data. And now what we're just going to do is to then come in here, since we already have the response, which is the answer from OpenAI GPT-4o model. The next thing we're going to do is to say constant. So just similar to how we did here, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but this time around we want it to not be for the chat user, we want it to be for basically the AI, right? So it should be on this side. So we're going to come here and say constant message wrapper 2 equals document dot create element div, just like this. And we're gonna say message wrapper 2 dot class list dot add chat message AI. So we come in here, there are two different styles for user and AI. So right here we have message.ai, right? That's what that is for. Now if I come down here, let's keep going. Next thing we want to do is the actual message element, constant message element 2 should be equals to document dot create create element. I'm gonna come here and pick create element. Once again, a div element, and what we're just gonna do is say message element 2 dot class list dot add message and AI, just like this. And we're gonna say message element 2 dot text content should be equals to response, right? And response is this particular data dot response. And now we're going to have to append message element to message wrapper. So we're going to say message wrapper 2 dot append child message element 2, just like this. And we're going to say chat history dot append child message wrapper 2, and then add a semicolon. And we're going to add one more thing. If I come down here, well, right here, and I'm going to say chat history dot scroll top equals chat history dot scroll height. We just want to make sure this is basically updated every time. So we want, like, once we have new message, we want it to automatically scroll down, right? Now that we have this saved, this should work. Let's come in here and hit refresh, and let's say something like I, and just hit send. Let's see. As you can see, it gives us a response saying, hello, how can I assist you today? Let's say, who is the president of America? And let's see what it says. As of this is the president of America. So this is quite good. This is basically what we want. As you can see, we have this good looking, ChatGPT clone where you can just go and ask any question. But yeah, as you can see, we've basically successfully built out this whole platform, right? And it was very easy, very straightforward. What we just did was to connect our OpenAI API key, created the whole Django project, created the template and the views and everything, right? Everything was successfully done. Now the last thing we can do is to actually save all the information into a database. So for example, what I mean is, if a user basically interacts with this chatbot, we want to save all these messages into a database. Now this could be for various reasons. You could save it so that when a user logs out and comes back in, they could see the message history, or you could save it just for research purposes, so you can train on your own AI model or whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you want to do, right? For this video, we're keeping it very simple. We're not creating a login or sign up system or anything. It's just a quick chatbot that anyone can come and ask this AI any question, right? But I'm just going to show you how to use a database in Django and how to save all of this information onto a database. So whatever you want to use it for, you can do that. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to save all of this information into a database. So Django uses something called models. And what I'm going to do is to actually open up this, and I'm going to come into the app folder, which is chat. I'm going to go into models. In here, this is basically like creating a database table, right? But we use Python classes. So to do this, we're just gonna create it by saying class, and we could give it a name of chat, something like this, but it needs to take models.model, just like this. And here we need to have the attributes. So the attributes should be user, or should be something like message. Then it's going to be models dot character field, and we have to give it a max length. Let's say something like 10,000. Okay, so we gave that 100,000, which is okay. And we're going to say response, which is a response from the AI. And we're also going to say models dot character field, and we're also going to give it a max length. Make sure you can see that, of 100,000. So just like this. Good. Now the next thing we can do is to give it a name. So we could just say str self return something like self dot, let's just say message, which is not really the best identifier, but we could use that. And one more thing we actually want to add is, let's say, created at. So this will just store the time and date that this was created. So models dot date time field, and we're going to give it auto now add this one. I give it that. I'm going to say equals true. So this is basically going to get the current time that the user interacted with that particular AI model and save it alongside with the other information in the database. So this is quite good. This is what we want. Now, whenever we make any change to the models file, we need to pop up the terminal right here, right? So as you can see, it says there is an unexpected keyword max. So this should be max length, max underscore length. Let's come here just like this. If I save this now, there shouldn't be any problems. Good. Now what I'm going to do is to come here, and I'm going to say, we're first going to make sure I'm in ChatGPT. So I'm going to say cd ChatGPT ls. Now I'm going to say python 3 manage.py make migrations. So this is basically going to tell me what I've changed. So it says I created a new model called chat, and this is kind of like version control. So it's kind of like tracking all your changes. But now, so think of it like GitHub, when it tracks all your changes. And what we want to do now is to then push this change onto our actual database. So once again, think of it like GitHub, when you actually push from your local machine onto the repository. So to do this, we're going to say python 3 manage.py migrate. And now we have this on our database alongside with all the default models that Django gives us once we create a new project, right? But the main thing we're looking for is chat right here. Now what I can do, I'm just going to close this, and if I open up this tab, I'm just going to collapse this right here. And if I come in here, you're going to see we have db.sqlite 3. If I hit enter, as default, Django uses SQLite to take care of our database. You can see we have chat right here. This is it. So right now we don't have any information. What we want to do is to change that. So we want that whenever a user chats with this system, so if they say I and hit enter, these two information alongside the current time that this was done should be saved into this database table. So now let's go ahead and do that. Now we are just going to come into models, and right here, no, not actually models, in views, And right here, we're going to say from the models import chat. And right when we get the user's message and then the answer, before we return the response, what we're going to do is to create or save those information into the database. So I'm just going to say new chat equals chat dot, well, actually we don't need to do that. We could just say chat, and then right here we could give it message equals message, so equals this message right here, and then response should be equals to answer. Now that we have this, the next thing we want to do is to just say new chat dot save. Now what this does is it's going to save this into the database, then we can return the response. So let's test this out now. I've saved this. I'm going to come here and hit refresh. I'm going to come back into the database and I'm going to hit refresh. As you can see, there's nothing here. I'm going to come here now and I can say hit enter. It gives me a response. If I come back in here now and I hit refresh, you can now see that we have one entry into that database. So it has a primary key, which is the ID, it has the message, it has a response from the AI, and it has the time that this was done, which is very good. So we can keep going and say something like, who is the richest man alive? Let's see what it says to that. It gives us this information. If I come back in here now and I hit refresh, you can see what it says to that. So you can use this data for whatever you want. Maybe if it's research purposes, maybe if it's to increase the user experience of the user that is using your application, whatever you want. But this is just how you can save that information into a database. So now that we have all this information, let's go ahead and deploy this application onto the web. Now we are going to deploy this application that we built onto the web. To do this, we're going to use a platform called Circumeo. Now this is a platform that makes Django deployment very simple, and I mean that when I say it, and you're going to see that in a few seconds, right? So this basically allows us to deploy our Django project with just a few clicks. So what you need to do is to go to circumeo.io. There'll be a link in the description below. So you just need to sign up, and when you sign up and sign in with your account, you're going to be taken to a dashboard. So before we move on, let me just quickly show you about this platform. So as you can see, it says deploy your Django app with 1 minute and 2 clicks. Literally, this is what it does. It automatically does all your database for you, all your migrations, all of that. All you just need to do is just to click on deploy, which is quite good. So all of this is automatically done for you. And now, once you sign up and sign in, you're going to be brought to this dashboard right here. So this dashboard is basically telling you to create your first Django project on Circumeo. So how do you want to create the project? Do you want to create it from scratch and start coding on their platform, or do you want to import it from GitHub, or do you want to upload it directly from your computer? What I'm going to do is to import it from GitHub. But before I import it from GitHub, I have to first push my project code onto GitHub, then I can do that. So what I'm going to do now is right here in GitHub, just going to have to sign in. So right here in GitHub, I'm just going to click on new to create a new repository. And I'm just going to say YT ChatGPT clone, just like this. And as you can see, it says it's available. I'm going to leave the rest like this. I'm going to leave it public. And I'm just going to click on create repository. And I'm going to wait for that to finish. Now, I'm just going to run all of this code right here in my terminal, in my project, just to make sure that everything is good. But before I run that, before I do any of that, I need to make sure that if I come in here, I need to make sure that some requirements are done just so, the deployment can work successfully, right? And the first thing we need to do is to make sure that our requirements.py file is good, and our requirement.txt file. If I come in here, I'm going to close this up and close this up. So right here, just gonna say ls, and I'm gonna say pip 3 freeze requirement .txt. And if I open this back up right here, you're going to see that a new folder called requirement.txt has been saved with all the necessary, basically all the necessary libraries that is needed for this your application to run successfully. So now that we have that, the next thing that we're going to do is to just push this project onto GitHub. And once this project is on GitHub, the next thing is to just deploy it. So the first thing we need to do is to remove this API key. I'm just going to say your API key. You should never post your API key or push your API key to your GitHub repository. Now I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to say git init. So it's initialize an empty repository. And now we're going to git add everything. Good. And now we can git commit. So we can just say git first app commit or something like that. And we can say git branch to main and git add, git remote add, and now let's push it. Push. Now this should successfully push it over there. I'm just gonna come here, refresh this. Good. Now you can see that this is here. Now the next thing that we're gonna do is to then come into Circumeo and import from GitHub. So now right here, I'm just gonna click on import from GitHub, and I'm just gonna say Chatbot. And right here, I'm just gonna put in the GitHub repository. I'm gonna come here, copy that repo, put it, and then branch should be main. And this update settings module, make sure it's ticked. Now, the reason why I say this is so that it automatically adds in the Postgres database. It automatically configures static files. It automatically configures everything that is needed. So make sure this is ticked and hit submit. So it says fill out this field. Let's just make this main. Come here to confirm that we're using the main branch, and come here and hit submit. So it said failed. Did you add Circumeo importer app to the repository? Now what you need to do is to click on this particular link, and it's going to install Circumeo importer into your GitHub. So click on install and click on where you want to install it. So I'm just going to say, let me only select repositories. So you could allow it for all your repositories, but for now I just want it to be for the YouTube ChatGPT clone, this one. I'm going to click on install. Now as you can see, it says it has been installed now, right? And I can come back in here now and hit submit. So once I hit submit now, you can see that it says pulling code from GitHub. Now this application is quite small, so it should take only a few seconds. And as you can see, that has been successfully done. Automatically is starting deployment. So what we can do is, if I come into settings, you can see that the database is automatically set to Postgres. You can see that we already have the static root, the CSRF trusted tokens. Everything is basically done, right? This is very good. This is what we want. And I'm just going to copy this because we're going to have to specify the OpenAI API key. So I'm going to copy this because we're going to use it later. I'm going to come into variables and I'm going to add a new variable, and the key. So for the key, I'm going to say OpenAI _ API, and the value, I'm going to come back into my code. We forgot to copy it, so I'm just going to Ctrl Z, right? I'm going to copy that, put that as the value, save changes. Now environment variable updated. I'm just going to copy one of these, the use case of this environment variable. I'm going to go into views, and I'm going to come in here. So instead of this, I'm just going to say os.this, but now I'm going to say OpenAI API, just like this, right? And then we could come back into logs, and as you can see, it saved this file. It saved views.py, and now let's allow it to deploy and let it do its thing. So if you come into logs, you can see that it installed all the necessary things needed, and now what it's just doing is executing everything needed. So it's running python manage.py run server, is migrating everything, and is going to deploy it and then run the server. So because we are using OS, we need to make sure that we add import OS. So that's because we are using os.environment right here. Now it's saving, and let's see what it says. So if I try to run this, let's see, it says internal server error. So right here is the actual URL for this, and the reason why is the key error OpenAI. So what we can just use to copy this directly if we don't want to use environment variable, although it is advisable to use environment variables, but we can also copy this directly, and that will definitely work. So let's just save this, and let's see. Now if we come back in here, hit refresh, as you can see, this successfully works. If I say I and hit enter, you can now see that I get a response. So we've successfully built out this application and deployed it using Circumeo. We have come to the end of this tutorial, and I hope you understood and enjoyed everything that we did in this tutorial. So what we did in this video was that we built a simple ChatGPT clone. So it's a basic bot where a user can come in here and just ask a few questions or ask whatever they want to ask, and they'll get a response. And at the end, we deployed it using a platform called Circumeo. So once again, there will be a link in the description below where you can sign up to Circumeo so you can use it to deploy any of your Django applications. I personally really love the platform because of how easy it is to deploy a Django application. And having all of this said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.